Alright, so with Season 8 coming out in 3 weeks, I figured it'd be a good time since I am on vacation to go over top 10 starters for Season 8 in Project Diablo 2. So we'll be doing this. My definition of a good starter is one that is cheap and effective. I understand that endgame builds, tier lists, this is not what that is. This is the easiest way to start out with a character and start building wealth early. That's important because I did chart it last season just to make sure what I knew anecdotally. Big ticket items, the inflation rate goes up slightly exponentially. So if you want Aterials or a 3-socket G-Skull or a 3-socket any helm really, best bet is to get them early. Easiest way to do that is, well, build your wealth up early when they only cost, say, a couple high runes as opposed to when they inflate to 10. So, bottom of the list here in terms of worst starters, and by the way, everything is really good to start with, but if we have to rank them here, Necromancer is going to be on the bottom for me. And the reason is, Poison and Bone is expensive. Well, Bone's not, but Poison is always expensive to sort of get rolling. That's because you need a 3-piece Trang set to really get it popping. And finding a 3-socket Trang shield, I mean, you can start with the easier ones, but it really just doesn't kick until you get the higher end gear. Summoning is good, but is always expensive because so many people play it. You can start with the Trang set, but early season, those pieces can go for an Istgal themselves, not to mention the skillers, and even the Czar's Sanctum dropping a skiller at the end has reduced skiller prices, sure, but it's still not really there for Necromancer. And Curse is the same thing, really gets rolling at higher gear levels. So your only cheap starter option here really is Teeth, which is just fine because a Bone Shade is only used by you and other Bone Mancers, so you're not really competing with people for gear there. But just, again, Summoner, very popular starter. Everyone says it's great. You can run it naked. Yeah, but it's kind of slow. People always sort of overstate how good Summonmancer is with low gear levels. So therefore, Necromancer's on the bottom for me. Number 7, I hate to say this, it is going to be Amazon, guys. The problem with Amazon is some idiot popularized Summons On, and it was a very cheap, effective way of getting a good character. As I said many times before, I tracked the times on it. A fully decked, geared Summons On like I was running was only about 20% slower than a top-tier Boazon for much lower cost. However, everyone has sort of picked up on the meta of Summons On. It's such a good Uber starter that you can run it on day 1 with like a Spirit Sword. So everyone's on it. It's not cheap anymore. Boazon is always expensive because you always got to find that big dick weapon, and that's always a problem on every physical character. Lightning, again, expensive. It just is. You have to compete and get lightning facets to really get it rolling, and then you're competing with Lightning Sork, which is one of the most popular Sork builds. So there's nothing cheap, and the only reason again, everything has a good starter somewhere. It would be starting on Summons On and doing an Uber Killer, but it's still going to come in 7th just because that is really the only effective option there. Next, in the same vein, is going to be Barbarian. The reason for this, again, is any sort of physical build, you need some sort of giant weapon or very specialized gear. That is every Barb build because Barb is generally a physical character. That counts for Frenzy, that counts for Whirlwind, that counts for Leap Attack. However, Warcries exists. So it is a good... Warcry is something that is cheap and easy to start. It's a great MFer. You have to run Trav runs ad nauseum, but hey, it's there. But with all physical builds, you gotta get the right gear. Eventually something's gonna be lacking in your starter quest, right? Either you're gonna be missing the damage from a big weapon, or you'll be missing some damage reduction that you need somewhere. You still gotta get a 3-socket helm, really, again, to get these builds sort of off the ground and rolling. And, damage from your Merc and things like that is just, it's too important for these builds. So, Barb is still going to be 5th. It's okay. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with it, but it's not exactly the, end-all, be-all here. Number 4, I was going with Paladin here. And the reason for that is it actually has a couple good starters. So, the benefits of Paladin over the other sort of offensively or physical damage-based classes is you can mix in, obviously, some native elemental damage with your Paladin. And there are very easy weapons to start with, because most of Paladin's damage comes really from its skills, the fanaticism, the zeal, things like this, right? So like a B-Star, which you can probably find for less than a Worldstone Shard on the website, even on day 1, is going to be a great starter weapon. You can probably find a bad Death Cleaver for 1 or 2 Worldstone shards pretty early, and that is going to get you into mapping. So even physical Paladin has some options there that the other classes don't really have. Try running a Barb with just the Death Cleaver. It doesn't work so well. On top of that, you still have your combat skill tree here, which is now getting so overloaded. Vengeance is good. Again, the elemental damage, you can pretty much use any weapon. There's a couple good budget starters. Blessed Hammer, we found out Hammered In is just as good as it always was when Wapinator tested it out with a full build last season. Fist of Heavens exists. I prefer Fist of Heavens because it's easier to play. But I mean, even Charge Paladin. You could start a Charge Paladin with a Death Cleaver and Native Holy Freeze and do just fine. So really everything on it, and Griswold set exists for the combats combat skills tree, which again, Trangs exists for Necro, but Griswold's is a lot cheaper than Trangs, and you can sort of pump in a lot of magic find into the Griswold set that you really don't do too often with Trangs because you need the extra power. So yeah, decent starter. This is the middle of the pack here, right? Let's see. Number 3, and I think the really 8 through 4, they're all kind of the same. I think you could rearrange those. You say Necro wants to be 4, maybe I'd argue with you on that. But you think Necro is easier than Barb? All right, I'll buy the argument here. I think there's 3 far and away best starters, and this is sort of where the second tier here starts. Number 3 is going to be Druid. And I say this every season, I hate Druids. I do. I never play them. It's the only class I haven't even played in PD2. I really never played it in Diablo 2. You're all furries and I hate you. But your class is good. So summoning, why is this better than Necromancer? Well, because of Alder's set. Alder's is cheaper than Trangs. Less people play Druid. Trangs is always the most expensive starter set. And Alder's exists, therefore summons on Druid is going to be easier to get to. And it's, in my opinion, a little bit stronger. Don't tell anyone I said that. Next, elemental skills. Wind is a wonderful starter because it does physical damage, guys. So that means you don't need the Infinity. Reaper's Toll on your Merc, you're good to go. And you're not competing with, there's not a lot of Armageddon players out there or Volcano players out there. So the elemental skillers are only being used really by Wind Druids. That makes them easier to obtain. If you go summons, by the way, you will still run into the expensive summoning skillers issue that you run into with Necromancer. But on top of that, you have an easy switch. I always tell people, hey, I play it like this. I'm getting my Magic Find character, maybe transitioning that into a mapper or creating my own mapper, and then I have an Elizabeth Olsen to dump all my runes into. Well, this one can do all 3 because you could literally start with Wind or start with summons to get yourself through, right? Everything gets too expensive. All right, fine. I'm switching over to Wind to get my skillers, and then end game meta, I'm going with, what is it, Rabies? Everyone was playing Rabies last season. So it was overtuned, it's still a little bit overpowered, so all in one character you can do all 3 of what the things I recommend you do during a PD2 season with just this. And it's incredibly easy to start. Even the endgame stuff, I mean, the weapons and the meta, go check out the Druid Discord, they'll have more info on this, but it is still cheaper than, say, an endgame Barb, for example. And it's going to be stronger. So what's wrong with this? Really nothing. The reason it's 3rd is because I think the other 2 options just provide a little bit more. And those are going to obviously be Assassin. I'm going to ruin the top spot, but we'll talk about why Sork's on top in a minute. Ooh, bad inventory data. That ain't good. Okay, there's really one reason why Assassin bumps up over Druid in my opinion, and that is the Chaos Claw. So you have, I'll go back to that here so people can see it, I guess, but let's start with what you'd be looking at. All right, well, we have Mind Blast, which everyone knows is still one of the best MF to power to cost builds in the game. It's a little underpowered in my opinion, but it's still great. You can still stack like just the most MF to the fastest clear speed ratio is probably Mind Blast right now. And still has been forever, really. On top of that, traps are still good even without the pierce. You do eventually need that infinity, sure, but you can get into maps without the infinity and probably be okay. Moreover, fire and lightning immunes are easier to break than cold immunes, and your traps are fire and lightning skills. So, there you go. Martial arts. Every martial arts still is pretty good. Even, I think Blades of Ice was like the lowest ranked of all of the pure just martial arts builds, but that's still phenomenal. And then even if you wanted to go with the physical builds on Assassin, which is generally Whirlwind, it's 0.8 high runes. It's an Ohm and an Om. That's pretty cheap if you think about it. Seriously, think about how many runes you got to spend to get all your skillers for a summon Necromancer, plus all the pieces of Trangs early. You're paying it as to a gull for the skillers and each piece of gear. That's going to end up being 1.5i runes by the time you're done. If you just get the Chaos Claw on the Whirlwind Assassin, it's amazing. This is all, you know, GG endgame gear. Sure, well, maybe not GG endgame, but you get the point. You can start this, even a physical build. It's probably the cheapest physical build to start in the game. If you just save up what you got at the start and find a good base, you're good to go. So everything starts pretty cheap. Everything works really well endgame, and honestly, Whirlwind was better. I still like the old Whirlwind where we mixed in the poison. It was half physical, half poison, but the pure physical assassin was S tier. It was broken, still is. So unless they nerf it, man, what's wrong with assassin? It can do everything and do everything cheap, and that's what we're looking to do to get ourselves started. So that obviously brings us to the last one. Why is Sorc number 1? It's because of the Czar's Sanctum changes. Sorc was always popular. If you guys want to see how juiced Sorcs still are, head over to Darmy's channel on Twitch. He will have plenty of advice and things on how to run Sorc. But first off, starting with fire, this is why I'm saying go play Sorc, or Sorc's the best starter. Because of the Czar's Sanctum drops, I had fire skillers with like 30 life. I could not sell them for single Worldstone shards. Fire is just blanketedly cheap. And remember, Oculus still exists. You know, we all want our Fathoms and our Astutas, but there is budget gear for Sorc. It's Oculus and the 3-piece Trangs to get you towels to get you started. You can get those for Worldstone shards early in the season. Your skillers, well, other people, Lightning Amazons, you're eventually going to have to get Lightning Large Charms and get rid of your skillers if you want to pump out max DPS. You don't do that with Sorc because of the masteries, so you still need your skillers, and the only people you're competing with are other Sorcs, and they're split into 3 categories. That's why Fire was dumpstered in terms of value on the skillers. Lightning is still good. You can still break the immunes with Static Field. You can break them early with Storm Spire on your Merc if you... I think I have one in here. I don't know why I would need to show a Storm Spire. You guys probably know what that is. But the point is, you can easily roll into Lightning and Cold. Cold is probably the more popular one because you do have Blizzard and Orb Sorcs, and Frost Nova too, which also works very, very well at high-end gear levels. But even that, I mean, seriously, what's expensive here? I mean, you're going to eventually want a 3-socket Nightwings, but you can make those. Medusas, again, you can get low FCR ones pretty cheap. Silk Weaves can get expensive, but I mean, no one's using Frostburns, and FCR Frostburns are probably your best in slot. If you're going for the cast rate build like I was, any sort of cast rate rings will work too. So you're just getting standard-ass caster gear. Plus, what, a Fathom that only Cold Sorcs use, Astutas that only the other Sorcs use. If you're Fire and Lightning, you're split between the two. At least on value on the Astutas. So it's going to be the fastest key farmer. It's going to be a great mapper. Remember, on Cold Sorc 2, you don't need an Infinity because you're not breaking the cold immunes anyway. Yeah, Sorc's back. The real problem with it was a little underpowered. It got retuned, and the skillers were expensive, and those got retuned. So Sorc is back on the menu. I will be playing Cold Sorc this season, or some sort of Sorc, because I promised I'd be the key farmer, and Wapinator will be doing Summons On. That's going to be fun, guys. You want to see Summons On videos again? Wapinator will be putting them out. We'll get his opinions on my beloved Summons On. And David will be playing Barb, as always, because he's boring. But, yeah, that's my starter list. If you disagree with it, just leave a comment below and know that you're wrong. See you guys later.